we can start by asking whether they have to make any comments on what I have already said, and then we will continue with questions. Professor Ganascia.
Oh, thank you. Yes, I have a lot of comment about this story of Damien Hirst. The first comment is related to the notion of intellectual property. And you mentioned copyright. But I'm not sure that copyright covers all our idea of intellectual property. And I think, for instance, in France, we distinguish moral rights, which is incessible. Yeah? You cannot transfer it. While copyright, by definition, you can transfer it. I think it's very different. And maybe you could have a discussion distinguishing what are the patrimonial rights, the fact that you can win money with a work of art, and the notion of intellectual properties. And in case of Damien Hirst, I think it's very interesting, because the idea is that he's the author in the etymological meaning, because he's a person who is at the origin of this all this piece, even if it is 200 years. And my second feeling is that he is a real artist, because what he is doing there is to show us the limitation of this notion of copyright. And a very nice way to do it, this is conceptual art. He say, okay, if it is possible, I can show that I am able to hack, in a way, this notion of copyright. And so I really like your example, because I think it's a very good introduction to our panel.
Thank you very much. Of course, for moral rights to be there, the work needs to have been created first, because moral rights and copyright in general are linked to a work, and the works have not been created yet. But of course, if the works are created and they are supposed to be Damien Hirst works, we have Damien Hirst hires moral rights. But on the other hand, this work must be created by someone that will also have moral rights. So we have ethical issues on both sides, which is something perhaps we can look at later on.
Just to answer, but the instruction is the creation, because it's the seeds of the creation. So this is really interesting. For instance, if you have an architect who's designing something, a plan of a building, and then he died, he passed, and you have some people who are building this place with this plan, so he's considered as the artist.
That's indeed true, because if Damien Hirst, in fact, designs the painting as such, and the other person just reproduces what Damien Hirst has designed, then of course Damien Hirst is the creator. That's indeed true. And I'm coming to you.
But where is it? Where does he want to go? What does he want to get? Does he want to change?
He wants his artistic legacy to exist in eternity, or at least 200 years.
A legacy, yes, but not the rights. I mean, the rights will be subject to consideration by the people then and there, not now, by him. The people then, the people that will exist in 200 years from now, or 250 years. Just imagine, it's as long as of a time as the one that elapsed since the Napoleonic time and the date in which we were all born after World War II.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just incredible, the will to change the world, not through a legacy, but through the willing of using copyright issues and so on, which is a figure of this day, not necessarily after even the digital age having passed by, because it has been transformed into something else.
We'll see that the words become very relative. One would say that this is an authentic Damien Hirst. Someone would say that this is a fake authentic Damien Hirst, because Damien Hirst meant for it to exist, but it was not him that created it. So we see that here, the way technology progresses, we have a few problems. But let's go to something which is very, very concrete and in particular. It is argued that AI-generated creations are very much dependent on the novelty of the idea of machine creativity. But we know that this is not a novel concept. So I would like you to give us some information about when it first appeared.
Thank you. Yes, to give me the opportunity to remind that this notion of machine creativity is very old. So maybe just to have an idea, the concept of computer has been introduced in the first half of the 19th century by Sir Charles Babbage. And his idea was that it was possible to build a machine which is able to execute algorithms. What is an algorithm? It's a sequence of instruction. I prefer to say that you know where the word algorithm comes from? What is the etymology of algorithm? Because we are in Greece, and in France, when I say this, many people say, oh, it comes from Greeks. No, it doesn't come from Greeks. It comes from Arabic. You know? The word algorithm comes from a mathematician who lived in the 9th century in North Iraq or something like this. And his name was Al-Khwarizmi. And so algorithm is a sequence of instruction. So the first computers were built to execute this sequence of instruction. And Charles Babbage designed his machine, but he never achieved it. He never built it because it was too costly, because he has to build many very small mechanical pieces. It was very expensive. But he had an assistant. And this assistant was Ada Lovelace Byron. You know, she was a daughter of the famous potter, Lord Byron. And she was a mathematician, and she tried to imagine the first programs of this machine, which has never been built. And she imagined what could be the application of this machine. And his extraordinary intuition was that this machine was not restricted to do mathematical work. It was possible to use it on different kind of data, like text, music, painting. And his intuition that it was possible to produce something which was new. And this is the origin of this notion of creativity. So after 1 century and a half, the origin of artificial intelligence, you say this discipline was imagined 70 years ago by a young mathematician, John McCarthy, and some other people like Marvin Minsky, Claude Shannon. I don't want to go in depth there. But they define a program, and they ask for the Rockefeller Foundation to fund a summer school in Dartmouth College in 1956. And they have a program, and they say, what are the different problems AI will solve? And the idea is that AI is a scientific discipline. I think it's very important, because there are so many misunderstandings about this. AI is not technique. In the first, it's a scientific discipline. What is the goal of the discipline is to model all our mental abilities, or our cognitive function. And they describe what are the problems to solve to do this discipline. So problem is to build a computer, to have a language to program this computer, etc. But one of the problems is randomness and creativity. So it was one of the first problems which was identified by these people. And after, you had many scientists who tried to solve this. And for instance, John McCarthy wanted to identify what is creativity in mathematics. What is for you creativity in mathematics? And for me, it is, okay, when you prove a theorem, and the proof is surprise you. And for instance, there is a criteria. You look at the proof and say, ha ha. And this expression, this exclamation, is the idea that this is creative. And so, after you had many other attempts to do creative machine. But what is interesting is in France, one of the first person was Pierre Barbeau. And maybe Gérard Assayag will mention his later on. And he was invented of this notion of algorithmic music in 1957, which is really early. And the idea was to use computer to help. Pierre Barbeau was a composer, music composer, and he was using this. And it's not restricted to music, and after you had many musicians who were using a machine in United States. You had Yaron Hiller in France, you had Pierre Boulez, which was mentioned before, or Yanis Xenakis, etc. But you had also many attempts in different disciplines, for instance, in painting, and in France, where a very nice artist whose name was Vera Molnar, and she was doing many nice painting with computer in the 70s and 80s.
Yeah, but we have gone a long way forward since then, because then the machine was used as a tool for creation. Now the machine, in fact, has the initiative of creation. You don't know what the output will be. When you were using machines in the past, you knew what would come out of them. You could control the output. Today you cannot.
I'm sorry, I disagree with you. The machine has not the initiative of creation. You are giving a prompt. This is what the person who was sitting on the seat before say. Yes, you because the machine. I think this is a very old question. The machine are doing many things we are doing. They are able to replicate many of our mental activities, and it's fascinating. And in case of AI generative, they are using, they are able to model our ability to generate text, etc. But they have no initiative by themselves. They have no will. What is okay? You design a prompt, and then you give the prompt to the machine, and the machine is able, from this prompt, to generate something. And if you are a good artist, you can use it as an instrument. This is what I wanted to say before, to generate something which is very new. If you are just a bad artist, you will do very bad things. Yes. The same thing with painting. You can use Dali or Midjourney, and so you have something which is totally uninteresting. And you have great artists, and I know some of them, who are designing something which is extraordinary, but it's a huge work. You need to be an artist to do this.
Yeah, the quality difference I'm referring to is the fact that when you were using in the past machines, you could tell what the output would be. Today, you cannot predict the output. If you tell the machine that I want to see a cheese with a hat, you do not know how this cheese will look and how the hat will look.
No, I don't. I disagree. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, of course. We're here to disagree.
I disagree, because the motivation of the first artists who were using the machine was to have something which surprised them. I think it was the case with Pierre Barbeau. It was the case with Xenakis. And you remember Yanis Xenakis, Greeks in France, was using probability, statistics to generate some music, so who surprised him. And you know, in France, you had also in literature, you had, have you heard about Oulipo? It was in French, Ouvroir de littérature potentielle. It was a group of artists headed by Raymond Queneau, who wanted to generate some text from constraints. And they had a special section, which was called Alamo, Atelier de littérature assisté par les mathématiques et l'ordinateur. Workshop assisted with mathematics and computers. And they tried to use it to generate some text, and the idea was to generate something which was surprising, which was different than what they can do before. So no, it was the idea was to use this tool as something which was something new, something different. And so this is the same from a conceptual point of view.
This is very, very interesting. I'm not going to disagree with the Sorbonne professor, never. So
No. What is important is an exchange
of ideas. Yes.
Well, but all that is true, is absolutely true. But human is beautiful. We are beautiful. And are we trying to change us? Are we trying to displace us in creativity? We have all the elements, all what it takes to be creative. Perhaps not as fast, perhaps not as efficiently, perhaps at the same velocity everyone, not at a different velocity, whereas if you are in the north than if you are in the south. Humanity, I mean, someone said in my preparation for this that to keep being human is the biggest task that we have nowadays.
And in fact,
Keep being human.
Sure.
Let's try to do that. Let's try our creativity. Let's try to make machines that can do all of these things, but be masters of those machines.
And that brings me to the question I wanted to pose you. Do you think AI is a threat or an opportunity for creation, or perhaps both?
It has both. It has both, precisely being a machine, not a substitute of the human being. Let me just quote my daughter. Last week in the family chat, she was not aware that I was coming here to say this, but she was telling her own sons and daughters and nephews and so on that please, when you are to make reflections or to judge or to give advice or enter into therapy of any type, don't use artificial intelligence. Come to me. Come to me. I can give you some advice. I can give you some words on that. I may be right. I may be wrong. But I will do it with love and with affection. That's what she was writing to my grandchildren last week. And I take her position. And I take her position. I feel like she does, or she feels like I do. She offered help to those in need for reflections and for judgment and so on.
Good. So I wanted to ask you, are there any ethics at stake when it comes to the use of AI? Because I know this is your specialization. And also, perhaps there are any human rights issues posed by AI. Do you want to give us some insights on that?
Yes, let me begin by human rights. As was mentioned, I was already in mid-career when Congress decided to choose me as the first defender of the people in my country. I was given a piece of paper with the name of the institution. Go ahead and make it work. How to do that, how to defend the people's rights. Of course, there was some experiences in some other countries of the world which I looked at, but more than that, I looked at the people. I looked and I heard what they were saying. I sensed what their needs were, and I found that their needs were to be real rights, were to be transformed into rights. So my task became that of transforming the expression of needs into my words of rights addressed to people in government who who are the task bearers of those rights. So I went back to the people to find out what they were needing, and to the government to tell them what was necessary. So that's my feeling, and I found later that there is a tendency or a theory of precisely from needs to rights. So those are, again, creations of humanity, not of machines. How to do that conversion is not necessarily what a machine, as efficient as it may be, can do. Let me perhaps use another sentence that I have somewhere for later. We heard this morning how much money or why some examples of this progression in industry, in the industry of artificial intelligence, are linked to the availability of money, of resources. We are with the artificial intelligence is leading us to a speed process rather than a value-led process. We are into speeding and finding solutions rather than tending to values. So if we do go after the money or go where the money takes us, we will be going into disregarding some of the rights to privacy, the rights to a decent living, the rights to an adequate compensation for musicians. Let's go into our subject of today. Human rights are at stake. So the invention and the capacity of us humans to make those machines must be kept with a distributive goal in mind. I mean, not with a concentration process as a result.
Can I be a bit provocative?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. For the sake of the discussion, I think different people may have different needs, and these needs may be conflicting, or even the same people may have different needs. So I'm an artist, and my need is that other people cannot make music via AI applications. I want the music to be created only by human beings. And perhaps there is another artist that wants to use AI as to make music. So which need would you accommodate?
As said, I was also a congressperson.
Yeah, exactly,
And
because you were a congressman, a
we,
politician, and I'm sure you would have such kind of conflicts. I'm just curious to see how you would handle that.
In Congress, we were to write laws and write principles for action of the society. And that's where we had to find the equilibrium between those needs so that everyone will benefit, not only a few ones, which is the distributive problem nowadays. And we are not inventing anything if we say that distribution of wealth is the main problem in our society, everywhere.
So how do you see this equilibrium?
I think that we have to distinguish two things. And maybe the confusion comes from this. We have to distinguish art and leisure industry, entertainment. So nowadays, with generative AI, it could be possible that many pieces of art, music, painting, etc., can be generated by machine, and the big tech industry will maybe decrease the cost of big entertainment industry like Walt Disney or Hollywood studio will use this. And I think it's a real problem. It's the reason why people in Hollywood put in strike because they were afraid of the fact that maybe, and you remember, I think 1 or 2 months ago, we had this new actors, which was a virtual actor using AI. So this is an economical problem. But you have the artistic problem, which is a little bit different. And I'm very anxious about this economical problem. And I think here, it's a place where you have to negotiate to be sure that the work of art will not be stolen by this big tech industry and that they will have the opportunity and the possibility to continue to be creative. But the real art, I think, is possible. And you have a new possibility with generative AI. And for instance, you have I remember Stromae, the musician who used flow machine, which was designed by a friend of mine, François Pachet, to produce Hello Shadow with a song with the voice of the singer Chiesa, which is very new. Or maybe there is an historian, Raphaël Dohan, in France, who wrote a book whose title was If Rod Hadn't Fallen. And it's a very funny story, which is generated by both Midjourney, because you have some illustration, and ChatGPT. And this is the history of Roma, if they have invented the steaming machine, which is very interesting. And the drawings are very funny. You have some board with chimneys and which are designed like a mosaic of the 1st century or something like this. So this is very inventive. And you have room for invention, room for artistic gesture with this new tool. So on this hand, I'm quite optimistic in the fact that this new technology will offer new opportunity for many artists. The problem is the problem of the industry, and this is the problem we have to solve. Why it's a problem? Because many musicians, they can live just because they send part of their time by sending what they are doing. And I think it will be a crisis in the future, and you have to be very cautious about this. But it's not the end of art. I think it's very important, because some people said these machines are creative. No, they are not creative by themselves. This is the reason why I disagree with you, I'm sorry. When you say they have this initiative. They have not the initiative. We are always men, and it's not, as some people say, the end of humanity. No, it's not the end of the case. But this is a change, and it's a real change. It's a change in society, and this is what we have to discuss.
Let's use your own words before. You mentioned now that we use these tools, yes, but also we use them as instruments. Generating something different, and that's something that we can master as humankind, something that we can regulate, something that we can define how to govern and establish regulations and laws. I mean, just imagine if the automobile industry were to be left alone. What would we have now? Automobiles that would just take on the air as they wished and go at whatever speed they wanted and make as much noise or contaminations as they wanted. But no, there was a need afterwards to regulate the production, the use, and the manner in which it would benefit humankind.
Just may I have a comment? Because this morning, people say, oh, we need good data to have good production. And I think it's true when you have an inference engine, search engine, or many professional use of AI. But in case of art, it's totally different. The idea of art, you start from garbage, and you are building a masterpiece. This is very different. In a way, the artists are alchemists. They are able to transform the lead into gold. And this is what people have to do with these new tools.
I think some misunderstandings are usually based from the fact that I come from the lawyer's perspective and you come from the philosopher's perspective and from a political perspective. And it's a very good thing that we can see all this perspective. But let me be very, very technical and concrete. Let's say that I'm a musician and I use AI to generate a musical work from it. Not as a tool, perhaps we understand that in a different manner, but I just put in a prompt, perhaps reiterative prompts, 20 prompts, 30 prompts, and it comes down to a final musical result. Who do you think should hold the rights? Me, the user, the AI system, or perhaps none?
I totally agree with you. That's the question. Who is the owner of this production? and also who can capture this production, because the risk is that people who own this technology will capture. Oh, maybe an artist is using a machine. I know a French artist, Caroline Zeller. She's drawing and painting, marvelous painting with this tool, and she's afraid that Midjourney is stealing her prompt. So this is a very difficult question for me. This is the artist who is the owner of this, but this is an open question. But to complexify the problem.
With political repercussions, because if it is the artist...
I would like to, do you have heard about meta-prompting? So meta-prompting is a practice where you are using, for instance, ChatGPT, and you are asking, could you design a prompt for Midjourney to generate these kind of things? So then you are using a first generative AI to generate the prompt that you are using for the second. Then who are the owner of the result of the second prompt? Is it you? Is it ChatGPT who generates the correct prompt? Or is it Midjourney who generates the output?
Yeah, that reminds me very much of this system Google Translate, that you put in the text and they give you the translation. You cannot be yourself the creator of the translation, in my view. But of course that creates other type of questions as well. Do you think that we need to prevent machines from using our output, the ones we have generated, in order to train themselves? I mean, the AI-generated output. Do you think we should be preventing these tech companies from getting that?
Just let back to your example about translation. So you are writing a paper, you translate it in another language, and then, okay, the translation, so this is Google who's the owner of the translation. But the content of the translation is you, because you are the person who wrote the original article.
I don't believe that Google is the owner of the translation. I believe that you can use freely the translation.
Okay. He did the work of the translator. He's not paid for this, but that's a problem for the translator. It's a real problem. But okay. The problem is, okay, who owns the results? And the result is you, even if you were using Google Translate.
Yeah.
We're talking about translators, and of course they have their rights, and they have their needs, and their needs becomes rights. But we were talking before about musicians, and here we are speaking with musicians and with the rights that they do have and that have been impinged upon by machines that take their work without their knowledge and use it to train those machines for further improvement, let's call it like that, of the art. Is that fair? No, it is not fair. Is that ethical? And I'm using the word purposely. No, it is not ethical. Is that common? Yes, it is. Should we stop it? Yes, we should. How? Well, through legislation, through moral, and through ways in which human can perform, should perform.
So you think that there should be legislation that can block people from using other people's work in AI? Is that what you mean? Can you please clarify on that? I'm not sure I have understood.
Damien Hirst cannot just wait until his death occurs so that envelopes can be opened 1 year after the other, condemning the rest of the world for 200 and some years to do his will, as he wrote it last week or last May. I know the world is changing and the needs of people will evolve, and they would define how to control and how to manage the how do you call the opportunities that these machines or tools or instruments bring. That's for humankind to decide, not for Earth, for Damien Hirst to define since now.
Let me take it a bit to the music and say the following, that eventually since their AI systems are available to all, we can all be musicians. We can all use AI to write the music, and we can all go on the market and ask for money about that. So instead of having, for example, 1 million musicians, we could have hundreds of millions of musicians asking money from the market. How are we going to deal with that?
It won't work. It won't work, no way.
So if it doesn't work, then we should not take the view of Professor Ganascia. We should say that the people that use AI to generate content should not get rights in the content. So what is out of the two? Should they get or should they not get right out of the content? I'm sorry for being so technical and so, concrete, but I'm trying to help the discussion. Yes or no?
Of course, it's their right. Of course, it's their,
right what, to get
their
right?
living, is their way of survival. I mean, their life is sacred, and they can maintain a good living if they work, and if they work at what they know how to do.
I think this is a market. The market is restricted. Just imagine that each day, the number of video which are generated is so important that it will last 30,000 years for a person to watch all this video. So it means that there is saturation of creation. So, okay, even
saturation, but that may not be to the benefit of real artists.
No,
real
it's not.
musicians.
It's not to the benefit because nobody will listen all this music. Nobody will be there, and it's also a problem for the culture, because the culture is the fact that we have some common reference. And if everybody is generating and nothing is listening, but so we need some artists who are a reference for other person. And I think this will continue in a way. So it's...
Let me come to my last question about aesthetics. And my question is, do you think that AI is changing our aesthetics, has an impact on our aesthetics? Do you think it impacts our taste in music?
Yes, this is exactly my point. I think that, as I said before, that AI and the digital is transforming all the society. And there is a word, a concept, which was introduced by an Italian philosopher who is now at Yale University, Luciano Floridi. And he said, this is the notion of re-ontologization. What does it mean? We are in Greece. What is an ontology? So the idea is that with the digital, we are rewriting all the concepts which correspond to the links between people. For instance, friendship is very old. For instance, if you read Nicomachean Ethics from Aristotle, he has 2 books on 10 on friendship. And with Facebook and different social networks, you are friends. Is it the same friendship? And the same with many notions, for instance, trust, with new technology, or currency with cryptocurrency is the same as paying with. Okay, and in case of culture, I think this is the same. You have a change. The culture is changed. And my feeling, but this is a hypothesis which I develop in one of my books, is that this change is similar but different to the change that was described by Walter Benjamin 19 years ago. You remember he wrote a very interesting essay, which is the status of the work of art at the time of its mechanical reproduction. His idea is that with the photography, with the film, with phonograph, so the work of art was different. The status, so the work of artists was different. For instance, for musicians, it was tragic because they get employed because they went every week to the marriage or different feasts, and so with discs. But also, he says that you have something which is different. He called it the appearing of what he calls the aura. So this is a very interesting notion. I don't want to, maybe if you want to. But what is changing nowadays with these tools, and maybe this is what to say. We are not in the problem is not the mechanical reproduction, but the mechanical production of work of art. And this is a change. The fact that you are not just reproducing, like with a photo, we are generating automatically work of art. And I think this changed many things. And, okay, what is the work of the artist there? You have different type of work. Some people are trying to use these tools like some new instrument to generate some new things. This is the case with some musician, with some painter, etc. And some of them also are doing what we call conceptual art. They try to have new gesture, like Damien Hirst or some other person. And okay, you have room for this also. Well, so this is exactly what I think is changing with these tools.
And are we learning? Are we learning from all of that? Is humanity learning from all this change?
Sure,
for
yes,
good? Yes.
For instance, in case of Damien Hirst, it's very interesting because we are learning, we are thinking about what is copyright when he's doing this, and this is a motivation which is yours, but you have many other things we can learn with this techniques to generate new piece of art.
So it is not artists that compete with AI, but it is artists competing between themselves, as you put it.
Exactly, yeah.
Do you agree?
Yes, I can agree with that, as long as there's no bias.
Okay.
There are no biases in the system, in the approach, in the availability of the means of production and the means of learning, the means of education, that people can compete fairly and not in a defined manner, the manner which is defined perhaps generations ago, or in terms of geographical location and different processes of education.
I've had the impression that there are some people in here that would share a different view and they would feel that artists do compete with AI. But unless you have to make any remarks, I can open the discussion to the public. Do you have any remarks to make? Okay, so yes.
Thank you. I'm Roberto Melo from Abramos, Brazil. I'm a lawyer, and I would like to agree totally with the conclusions of Drs. Rodrigo Carazo and Jean-Gabriel Ganascia. They are completely right. We are living in a world divided between a copyright system and an author right system. The center of the right in the author right system is the creator, is the person, is a human right. In the copyright system, the center of the right is the work, is the materialization of a creation. I use the example that defines clearly this. In copyright system, you remunerate the work, The Girl from Ipanema. In the author right system, you remunerate Tom Jobim and Vinícius de Moraes. It's completely different. The center of the right, patrimonial and moral rights, are centralized in the person. Brazil divided the legislation. We have a copyright system for trademarks, patents, models of invention. And then you have questions relating to a statute of limitation, prescription, necessity of registration that does not exist in the author rights system. That's centralized as a human right, a physical right, a personal right. This division establishes clearly what we defend in a world now invaded by artificial intelligence. There are no creators, any work derived for artificial intelligence. And we have to defend the human right defined as a human person, creator of the works. That's the point.
Thank you very much for your view. So any questions or views? Perhaps? Go ahead.
Thank you very much. I'm Laurent Tardy from French Union SNAM. It's not to talk about France. and we are the best, and so on. Thank you for the panelists to reshape our lives, to debate about AI will reshape our lives. I will add our lives of musicians. We are performers here. We are not only authors. Sometimes we are both authors and performers. But the question about is the output must be protected by copyright or not? It's very important questions. But for the performers, you know, in the Rome Convention, the performers is the person who interprets and so on literary work. The question to know is this work protectable with copyright is a question important, because if I'm a performer, but the Rome Convention doesn't say if the work must be copyrighted, because you know in the public domain the question important for us is the will AI how many jobs of performers will remain after this enormous wave of and you know it's a question of performance, you know, of live performance also, and I've never heard in your conversations something about that, but it's a very important question for us, and. You know, we have some reflection in France about the question of how AI companies could help could finance in a certain way some job losses. You know, or to encourage job creation. To have not only you know AI contents without any physical musician, you know. And it's a very important question, you know. It's a social question.
Yes, no, thank you for your question. I think this is exactly the point. The first things we wanted to say was that the status of artist is not disappearing. You have new way of creation with these tools. But yes, you have some work of artists, some activities, professional, which are in danger. And this is a real problem. And this is the same with translator, you mentioned this. I gave some talks, I was invited by translator, it's dramatic for them. Because they have no contract. And when they have a contract, they say, oh no, don't translate, just could you reread this translation? And it's less paid, but they have, okay. And I think it's a problem. This is the reason why I mentioned this relation with Walter Benjamin paper, because here's the intuition in the 30s that some status of work of art was changed with reproducible, the notion of reproducibility. For instance, I mentioned phonograph. I think, yeah, at this time, it was possible for any artist, music, for instance, sometimes a violinist or a trumpetist, he was able to when his wife, every week, every Sunday, he was going to play, etc. And now it's far more difficult. It has nothing to see with generative AI. It has to see with the fact that with phonograph, with disc, with CD, it's useless because we have less living music in, and so you have a similar transformation today, and the risk is that it would be worse and worse for musicians. The reason, I think, why it's important for you to negotiate with this big tech company, because the risk is that they will reuse your work to train their model and then to generate other profits. So it's important for you to take the measure of this transformation. So I totally agree with you. And one of the problems is, okay, when you train the model, how you retribute the artists whose work are used to train this model. And this is a very complex problem. For instance, in case of literature, this model are trained with all literature. And you have difficulties, for instance, for France, because you mentioned France. Okay, some people say, okay, we want to protect our author. But the problem is that if you say, okay, we protect our author, you will have no French literature in this, and then the French culture will be marginalized. So this is a question, you have an equilibrium, because of the fact that you want to be represented in this training set, and you want also to be retributed for this. So this is a huge question, and this is a question you have to debate and you have to be represented in the negotiation with all these companies. First, a big tech company were building these models, and also the entertainment company who are using this model and who want just to pay less for the production.
I think the performers are less at risk with AI because they can have rights even if they perform or in fact execute works that are not copyright protected. So I think you belong to the category that is less at risk. Perhaps the biggest risk is when these people's performance is fed into the system to produce further performance. This is the risk, the serious risk that performers run, in my view. So, yes.
Just to add, there's
Yes.
a question of distribution of wealth. The
Yeah.
principles of distribution of wealth. Where does the surplus go?
Yes, but it seems now that the wealth, the real wealth, is the data. And the data is owned by very specific tech companies.
So this is for Rodrigo, the question. We've been having conversations prior to this, and we've learned of this commission that's working in governance in the UN, and we even now know who the people from the commission are. So I just wanted to ask you to share, what do you think it can be done within the UN regarding this, within human rights? And then how does that work that we can accomplish inside the UN can benefit all the countries and so on, the legislation? So what could be a good expectative and what is the work to come regarding this?
Let me begin by saying that first of all, we have to fix the UN, which is a mess. I mean, we heard about the Stone Age speed in which things are solved at the UN. And may I give you a word of hope? Next Secretary General will be a woman. And then changes may begin to happen when we have a woman directing this great organization, which has the most highly spirited purposes, no doubt about that. So we learned together, Irene and I, about the existence of this global body of artificial intelligence entity, which was established by the Secretary General in 2023 and presented his first report in 2024. And her dream, Irene's dream, is that we can cope, that we can somehow relate to the people there and give in our plans, give the space that musicians particularly need in terms of being present at this important change for musicians and for the rest of humanity, that is artificial intelligence. Don't fight them, join them. Let's see if we can get there.
Hello, my name is Simeon Smith. I'm with the Musicians Union of Ireland. It occurs to me that if we have a situation where we could have 1 billion music producers using AI to generate music, and And I was reading the article that came in the booklet with this conference, and one of the statistics that shocked me is that 84% of listeners cannot discern synthetic content. They don't know what they're listening to. So maybe the challenge for us as musicians is to really try to strengthen the education around music so that young people can learn, firstly, to appreciate or discern good music from bad music, but also to appreciate the role of a musician, that a musician is a valued member of society and that their careers should be protected.
That's very, very interesting point. I don't know whether you would like to comment any of you on that.
We have turned musicians into negotiators. They have to find out how to charge and how to be compensated and how to make useful contracts and so on. And now, rightly so, you want to make them into educators also. Musicians make music. Musicians do a task that is valuable for humanity. Let's share on the responsibilities. The education is not the responsibility of musicians from my point of view, but all the results that you mentioned are absolutely necessary.
And if AI affects, in fact, our aesthetics about music, little by little we'll get used to listening to music, AI music, and we'll think that this is the nice music, the beautiful music, right? We'll be trained in a wrong manner, perhaps.
Yeah. But you have also another problem today, which is a problem of prescription, of recommending system, because you are totally lost in the amount of work which is generated. For instance, I've heard that you have many books now, many novels which are generated by AI. I never heard a person who told me that, oh, he wrote a book, a synthetic book generated by AI, which changed his life. So maybe it's not really interesting literature, but it's very difficult for people to navigate in this ocean of creation. And I think it's the case with novel, with music. It's a problem also for publisher, because they receive many novels, many things which are automatically generated. It's very difficult for them to distinguish between what is automatically generated and what is the work of art. So you are right. You have many new questions which are related to this enormous quantity of generated content, and the questions which are behind are huge, yes, for the future.
And of course, the question of what is a work of art is something I think that law wouldn't like to touch upon at all, because it's very difficult to draw the boundaries about what is art and what is not art. Do we have any other questions? Yes.
Thank you. This is more a comment perhaps for the three of you, but it was pointed out by the moderator. You said that performers are not, in your view, such as risk than other creators. In my view, performers are also threatened by AI, because...
Absolutely. I'm just saying in terms of degree.
Yes. I see several points where performers are threatened by AI. On a first consideration, all the performances are being ingested by AI developers, by AI systems, without having the consent from performers to do so. So this is a first infringement.
This is exactly what I said, that the problem lies with feeding the system, not with what coming out of the system. That's exactly what I said.
Okay, the point is, this is one of the problems. In my view, there is another one regarding the output, facing the competition by other music which is not created by humans. So there are two important threats here. And of course, also the use of the personal data, of the personal features of the performers that also use in the system. So, of course, from the point of view of the creation, they are not so affected because they are performers. It's not the question of if the work has been created by them or not is nothing, something that is not posed to them, but there are big threats, in my view, for performers. So, and at first, providing them from the content. Thank you. From the concept.
I would like to ask the audience, those that believe that AI output should be protected by copyright, could you please raise your hands? That's very, very interesting. Complete minority, which is interesting, because sometimes we speak about other people, we speak about a particular industry, and we don't ask what the industry would really like. Yes.
If I may say something, Paul Tomori from EurAI Hungary. When I say copyright, I mean not just exclusive rights, as many of those who haven't raised their hand would have thought about. I'm also thinking about compensatory systems, such as private...
So sui generis systems, not
no,
copyright.
No, compensatory systems, such as, for example, private copying, which is a tool, which is clearly a copyright tool, but is not reversed directly what is copied. We don't need to identify what is copied, and we still can use a system which is very much copyright related. So when I'm saying protected by copyright, I don't mean solely the traditional exclusive rights, but all the systems, all the regimes copyright can produce, including those awarding right holders with only a right to remuneration, which is of a compensatory nature.
Yes, thank you for your comment. So just to say that one of the questions is what will be protected? Is it the work which is generated, or is it the way the artist is generating? Because I know artists are using AI generation technique and AI generative techniques, and who are doing really piece of art which are really of interest. And this is a huge work, and we need to protect them. And what they want is to be protected, to be sure that the tech company will not reuse their prompt and their methodology to generate other things. So we need to protect something. But maybe it's not the fruit.
We need to protect something. Why? Because protection needs to be there to serve a purpose. Copyright, for example, is recognized because it gives an incentive for further creation. What is the incentive here? If these people don't have the incentive, they won't produce works by AI. We don't give protection in this world just to give protection. We give protection for a justifying reason. So we need to see what the justifying reason is, what this protection is serving.
Yes, the reason is that they invented some way to use these tools, and they wanted them to be protected because they want to generate other work of art with this method. So this is exactly what you say.
It has already been mentioned here. Protect the person, not the work.
Yeah, it's not. So the notion of copyright, I think, is obsolete in this respect, and we have to invent some new things to protect them.
So sui generis legislation. So are there any, yes, here I see the gentleman, he wants to ask something. Can we give him the mic, please?
It seems to me that it's necessary to give you some information at this point, because we are talking here like this was the future. But Deezer has told us a month ago that 28% of everything that's uploaded to their platform in September is 100% artificially generated. So now it's probably already 40. And by the end of the year it will be 50, and by the end of next year it will be 80. So I think it's kind of useless to talk about this like this was being something in the future, and we could... Huh?
Or artist generated.
Yeah. So anyway, I'm just to keep that in mind, that because it hasn't been said, I think, up to this point. Thank you.
Hello.
I'm Miliano Toniou from the Greek Society of Music Authors Otodia, and I would like to comment on what Mr. Ganascia said before about reontology and new aesthetics. If we have in mind that algorithms cannot listen to music and cannot read a book in the way that humans can, then we cannot say that algorithms experience creativity as humans do. In what way we can actually talk about art in terms of experience? Humans, we create and we enjoy, we use inspiration, we use our imagination, we take some time to create, so there is an experience for us and the experience that enjoy people who see or listen to this creation. And algorithms cannot go through this experience, but they bypass it. So maybe we should create this experience and we should teach our children to be creative in this way. And we should protect this creative experience that it's human-generated.
Yeah, thank you very much. This is exactly what I wanted to say. Yes, this is a new type of creation assisted by computer that we need to take into account and we need to protect. So, but it's exactly what I want to say. Thank you.
Good day. I'm Argyris Theos from the collective management organization Socrates. I want to address Professor Ganascia. And in my view, the product of generative AI is not artistic. In my view, generative AI is restricted to what has already been created and redistributes bits and pieces from here and there to create something that is unique, but it's not artistically innovative. In my view, there is no way you can have a new expressionism or a new surrealism or a new trend in art from generative AI, at least today. I don't know what will happen in 5 or 10 years, but today it is restricted. And being of a film origin, I have tried to use, with the help of experts, to create some videos, and we failed. We failed to create what we needed for a specific film. The product was something very nice, but not suitable for the specific need. Thank you.
So thank you very much for your comment. I have two answers. The first, I agree with you. I try, for instance, to use DALL-E or Midjourney, and I realized that this was culturally anchored in some culture. So when you generate a picture, it corresponds to the context, North American context, etc. This is a real problem because it reflects the set of things which were used to generate the content. So I totally agree with you. But I have another question, which is it's a very old question. What is originality? What is creativity? And I have in mind a comment of Paul Valéry. You know who was Paul Valéry? He was a French philosopher living in the first half of the 20th century. And in his work, first thing I think is very interesting. He says that with new technology, one day it will be possible. He called, I think it was the notion of ubiquity. He said that you will deliver music and painting like you deliver gas and water in house, which is very interesting idea. But he was also thinking about this notion of originality. And what he say, okay, when you are reusing the work of others, is it plagiarism or not? And this is a question with this tool. Is it plagiarism when you generate from text or from picture from other picture? And his idea is that, in fact, plagiarism is the fact that when you generate something, you see the piece which were used to train. For instance, if you are a plagiarist, if you are reusing some text, and it's possible to identify the origin of the plagiarism. And he say originality is to have a good stomach, is to digest correctly. And I think what happened with these new tools, this is the reason why they are a little bit frightening and we are for them, because this good, very big language model and music generator have very good stomach in this sense.
I would like very much to thank Professor Jean-Gabriel Ganascia, Rodrigo Alberto Carazo, and primarily you for having contributed to this debate. Thank you all very much.